Her open palm cracked across his face so hard his glasses flew off and skidded across the courthouse floor. David Thornton, 47 years old, single father, the only parent his 7-year-old daughter had left in this world, hit the ground with his knees, blood already pooling at the corner of his mouth. Officer Patricia Vance grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back up. "Deadbeat trash like you don't get to walk through my door." She spat the words 3 feet from a bronze nameplate that read, "The Honorable Judge D. Thornton, presiding." She had no idea she'd just slapped the man who would end her career before lunch. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. David Thornton woke up at 5:14 a.m. the way he always did. Not to an alarm, but to the sound of small bare feet padding across the hallway floor.
"Daddy."
Lily stood in the doorway clutching a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Her blonde hair was tangled from sleep. She was crying, but quietly, the way kids cry when they've been practicing being brave. David sat up immediately. Hey, come here, what's wrong?" She climbed into his lap and pressed her face against his chest. "I had the dream again." He didn't need to ask which dream. It was always the same one. Her mother's car, the rain, the sound of sirens that came too late. "It's okay," David whispered, wrapping both arms around her. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." She pulled back and looked at him with her mother's eyes. Green, serious, searching. "You have court today?" "I do." "Are you going to help people today?" David smiled. Every morning she asked the same question. Every morning he gave her the same answer. "That's the plan, sweetheart." "Good." She wiped her nose on his t-shirt. "Mommy said that's what you do. You help people nobody else helps." David's throat tightened. 3 years since the accident, and Lily still talked about Sarah like she'd just stepped out of the room. Sometimes that was the only thing that kept him going. "Tell you what," he said. "How about you help me make breakfast? Pancakes? Can I put the chocolate chips in?" "You can put all the chocolate chips in." She grinned, that gap-toothed grin that could fix anything in the world, and ran toward the kitchen. David sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing his face with both hands. His back ached. His eyes were bloodshot from staying up past midnight reviewing case files. The Peterson hearing was today, a complicated custody dispute that had been eating at him for weeks. He glanced at the framed photo on his nightstand. Sarah, laughing at something off camera, her hair blowing sideways in the wind. Next to it, a smaller frame, his judicial oath certificate, signed the year Lily was born. He'd given up a lot for this job. Private practice would have paid 4 times his judicial salary. But Sarah had understood. "Somebody has to care about getting it right," she'd told him once. "Might as well be the guy I married." He stood up, stretched, and followed the sound of his daughter ransacking the kitchen. By 7:45, David had dropped Lily at Jefferson Elementary, kissed her forehead, and watched her disappear through the front doors, waving her rabbit at him over her shoulder. He was running late. There'd been a spill at breakfast, chocolate chips everywhere, syrup on his last clean dress shirt. And he'd made a decision he'd regret for the rest of the day. Instead of going home to change, he'd go straight to the courthouse in what he was wearing. A faded flannel shirt, old jeans, work boots. His robes were hanging in his chambers. He could change there. Nobody would care. He'd done it 100 times. He grabbed his backpack from the passenger seat. Case files, laptop, reading glasses, and the lunchbox. Lily had insisted on packing his lunch herself that morning. A peanut butter sandwich, cut into a crooked heart shape. A juice box, and a note in green crayon. Have a good day, Daddy. Make the world fair. Love, Lily. He locked the truck and walked toward the courthouse entrance. It was 8:47 a.m. He never saw it coming. Officer Patricia Vance had been working courthouse security for 6 years, and in that time she had developed a system. She could size a person up in 3 seconds flat. Clothes, posture, attitude. She read people the way a poker player reads tells. And she was almost never wrong. At least, that's what she told herself. She was leaning against the metal detector, sipping coffee from a paper cup, when she spotted him coming up the steps. Flannel shirt, beat-up jeans, backpack slung over one shoulder, unshaved. A lunchbox, a kid's lunchbox with cartoon characters on it, in his left hand. She set her coffee down. "Well, well," she muttered to Officer Derek Gregg, who was checking IDs at the door. "Here comes another one." Gregg glanced up. "What do you think? Custody case?" "Look at him." Vance's lip curled. "Probably can't even afford a lawyer. $10 says he's here to beg some judge for weekend visitation after his ex finally got smart and left." David reached the top of the steps and headed for the main entrance. He had his courthouse ID in his back pocket. All he had to do was flash it and walk through. A 30-second interaction, nothing more. "Hold it!" Vance stepped directly into his path, blocking the door with her body. She was tall, 5'10", and she used every inch of it. "Where do you think you're going?" David stopped. "Morning. I'm heading inside. Running a little late, actually, so I didn't ask about your schedule. I asked where you're going." "Into the courthouse." David kept his voice even. He'd dealt with difficult people every day for 23 years. A rude security officer wasn't going to rattle him. "I work here." Vance looked him up and down, slowly, deliberately. Her eyes lingered on his flannel shirt, his old boots, the cartoon lunchbox. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a laugh designed to humiliate. "You work here?" She turned to Gregg. "He says he works here." Gregg smirked. "Doing what? Cleaning toilets?" "Even the janitors dress better than this." Vance crossed her arms. "Let me guess. You're here for family court. Custody hearing? Restraining order violation? Come on, I've seen 1,000 guys like you." David reached for his back pocket. "I have identification. If you'll just let me—" "Don't." Vance's hand shot to her belt. "Keep your hands where I can see them. I didn't say you could reach for anything." "I'm reaching for my ID." "And I said don't move. Are you deaf or just stupid?" David froze. His pulse ticked up, but his face stayed calm. 23 years of controlling a courtroom had taught him how to manage moments like this. Stay calm. Don't escalate. Let the other person run out of rope. "Officer," he said quietly, "I'm going to slowly take my ID out of my back pocket. It's a courthouse credential. It will clear this up immediately." "Nothing to clear up." Vance took a step closer. Her breath smelled like coffee and peppermint gum. "I know exactly what you are. You're another deadbeat dad who thinks showing up to court in dirty clothes is going to win sympathy from some soft judge. Am I right?" "No, ma'am, you're not." "Don't ma'am me." Her voice hardened. "I've been doing this job for 6 years. I can spot your type from a block away. You roll up here looking like you slept in your truck, carrying a kid's lunchbox like some kind of prop. Probably rehearsed your whole sad story in the mirror this morning." "Officer Vance." David read her nameplate and used her name deliberately, a technique he'd learned in de-escalation training. "I understand you're doing your job. I respect that. But I need to get inside this building, and I have proper identification that will—" "What you need," Vance cut him off, stepping so close that their shoes were almost touching, "is to learn some respect. Because right now, you're this close to spending your court date in a holding cell instead of a courtroom. David's jaw tightened. He could feel the seconds ticking away. The Peterson hearing was in 40 minutes. Attorneys were waiting. Families were waiting. A child's future was waiting. "I'm going to reach for my ID now," he said, and moved his hand toward his back pocket. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Vance grabbed his wrist and twisted it hard to the left. David's body followed the torque involuntarily, turning sideways. His backpack slid off his shoulder. The lunchbox hit the ground, popping open. Lily's peanut butter sandwich tumbling out, the crayon notes skittering across the concrete. "I said don't move!" Vance shouted, loud enough for everyone on the courthouse steps to hear. "I was reaching for my—" Her open palm cracked across his face. The sound was sharp, like a branch snapping. David's glasses flew off his face and skidded across the stone floor. His head snapped sideways. Blood bloomed at the corner of his mouth where the inside of his cheek split against his teeth. For 1 full second, everything stopped. Then Vance grabbed him by the collar of his flannel shirt with both hands and drove him backward into the stone wall of the courthouse. The back of his skull hit the wall. Stars exploded across his vision. "Deadbeat trash like you don't get to walk through my door." Her face was inches from his. Her eyes were bright with adrenaline, almost excited. "You think you can just stroll in here looking like a bum and I'm going to roll out the red carpet?" David tasted blood. His vision was blurred without his glasses. But somewhere through the pain and the ringing in his ears, a cold, clear voice in his mind was already cataloging everything. Assault, battery, excessive force, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, Fourth Amendment violation, 14th Amendment violation. "Turn around." Vance spun him and slammed his chest against the wall. She wrenched his arms behind his back. Metal handcuffs bit into his wrists. Too tight. Deliberately too tight. "You're hurting me," David said. His voice was steady. Eerily steady. "Good. Maybe next time you'll listen." On the ground, 3 feet away, Lily's crayon note lay face up on the concrete. "Have a good day, Daddy. Make the world fair." Vance's boot came down on it as she dragged David toward the door. Greg was laughing. Not quietly. A full, open laugh, like he was watching something entertaining. "Damn, Vance, you really clocked him." "He swung at me," Vance said loudly, for the benefit of the 2 other officers who had drifted over from the parking lot entrance. "You all saw it. He became aggressive, and I responded with appropriate force." "Absolutely," Greg confirmed, still grinning. "I saw the whole thing. He lunged at you." David said nothing. He was being marched through the courthouse lobby in handcuffs, blood dripping from his lip onto the polished marble floor. Court clerk stopped and stared. A young attorney he vaguely recognized pressed herself against the wall to let them pass, her face white with shock. "Eyes front, buddy." Vance shoved him forward. "You're going to love the holding cell. Very cozy. Perfect for guys like you." They passed the main directory board on the wall. David's name was listed 3rd from the top. Judge David R. Thornton, Courtroom 3, 2nd floor. Vance didn't look at the board. She never did. She already knew everything she needed to know about the man in handcuffs. She'd known it the moment she saw his flannel shirt. The holding room smelled like industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Vance sat David down on a metal bench and cuffed his right hand to a steel ring bolted to the wall. "Comfortable?" She stood over him with her arms crossed. "Because you're going to be here a while." "I'd like to make a phone call." "I bet you would." Maybe call your ex-wife and tell her you're going to be late for court? Or maybe call your public defender, if you even have one? I'm entitled to a phone call. That's not a request. Something in his voice made Vance pause. There was no anger in it, no fear, no desperation. It was the voice of a man who was stating a fact the same way he might say, "The sky is blue." It was the voice of someone who was used to being listened to. She didn't like it. "You'll get your call when I say you get your call." She turned to Greg, who was leaning in the doorway. "Book him for trespassing, resisting arrest, and assault on a police officer." "You got it." "And Greg?" Vance lowered her voice, but not enough. "Make sure the report says he was verbally abusive and physically combative. Through the first punch, I defended myself." "Same as always?" "Same as always." David heard every word. He filed it away with the rest. Conspiracy to file a false report. Obstruction of justice. Evidence tampering. Vance turned back to him one last time. "You know what your problem is? Guys like you think the rules don't apply to you. You think you can just show up anywhere, looking like anything, and the world owes you something. Well, it doesn't. And men like you," she leaned down until her face was level with his, "men like you shouldn't be allowed near children. Whatever custody you're fighting for, I hope to God the judge gives that kid to somebody who actually deserves them." David looked at her. Just looked at her. His left eye was swelling shut. Blood had dried on his chin. His wrists were raw from the handcuffs. But his eyes, the one good eye she could still see, held something that made Officer Patricia Vance take one involuntary step backward. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was certainty. The absolute, unshakable certainty of a man who knew exactly what was going to happen next. "Officer Vance," David said quietly, "you're going to remember this morning for the rest of your life." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook it off, laughed, and walked out. "Sure I will, buddy. Sure I will." The steel door clanged shut behind her. David sat alone in the holding room, handcuffed to the wall, his daughter's lunchbox gone, his face bruised, his blood on the floor. He closed his eyes and took one long, slow breath. Then he began to plan. 45 minutes. That's how long David sat handcuffed to that wall before anyone came back. 45 minutes of listening to his own breathing, tasting blood, and running through every statute, every precedent, every constitutional violation that had just been committed against him. Most men would have spent that time in panic. David spent it building a case. The door opened. Greg stood there holding a clipboard. "On your feet. You're going in front of a judge." "Which judge?" "Does it matter? You're getting arraigned, pal. Trespassing, resisting arrest, assault on a police officer. That last one's a felony, by the way, so I'd start thinking about how cooperative you want to be." David stood. The handcuff on his right wrist had rubbed the skin raw, and his left eye had swollen almost completely shut. "I'd like my phone call." "Already told you. You'll get it when I'd like my phone call now. Under Miranda versus Arizona, I have the right to contact an attorney before any court proceeding. Under the Sixth Amendment, I have the right to adequate time to prepare a defense. You've held me for 45 minutes without allowing either. That's a constitutional violation, Officer Gregg, and you know it." Gregg stared at him. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not recognition exactly, but confusion. The same confusion a dog might feel when a rabbit suddenly turns around and growls. "You some kind of lawyer?" "I have some familiarity with the legal system." Gregg shifted his weight. 5 minutes. You get 5 minutes." He uncuffed David from the wall, led him to a phone mounted on the corridor wall, and stepped back just far enough to pretend he wasn't listening. David dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. Chief Judge Wells's office? Janet, it's David Thornton. Judge Thornton, oh, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for an hour. The Peterson attorneys are here. The courtroom's empty. Nobody knows where— Janet, listen to me carefully. I need you to put me through to Chief Judge Wells right now. Not in 5 minutes. Not after her meeting. Right now. Something in his voice cut through everything. 3 seconds later, Catherine Wells picked up. David, where the hell are you? Morrison is covering your docket, but the Peterson case— Catherine, I'm in a holding room in the basement of my own courthouse. I'm in handcuffs. A courthouse security officer named Patricia Vance assaulted me on the front steps this morning, arrested me without cause, and is currently booking me on charges of trespassing, resisting arrest, and felony assault on a police officer. Silence. 5 full seconds of it. David, say that again. You heard me. I arrived in civilian clothes. She decided I didn't belong here. She slapped me across the face, slammed me into the wall, cuffed me, and dragged me through my own courthouse. I'm due in front of Judge Morrison in about 10 minutes for arraignment on fabricated charges. Jesus Christ, are you hurt? Split lip, swollen eye, some bruising. Nothing that won't heal. I'm calling the FBI. I'm calling the— Not yet. Catherine, I need you to listen. I need you to do 3 things for me right now, and I need you to do them quietly. First, contact the courthouse security office and order immediate preservation of all surveillance footage from this morning. Every camera, every angle, between 8:45 and 9:15. Multiple copies, multiple locations. Done. What else? Second, have someone bring my judicial robes to the small conference room adjacent to courtroom 3. My chambers are locked. Janet has the key. The robes in the garment bag on the back of the door. And Catherine, tell them to bring my gavel, the wooden one, in the box on my desk. David, what are you planning? Third thing, don't intervene. Don't send anyone. Don't make any calls except the ones I just asked for. I'm going to let this play out. Let it play out? David, you're sitting in handcuffs in your own building. You have a black eye. Catherine, I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've prosecuted 47 police misconduct cases. I have never once had the opportunity to witness this kind of corruption from the inside, from the victim's chair. Another pause. When Catherine spoke again, her voice had changed. The panic was gone. In its place was something harder, something that understood exactly what David was doing. You're going to let her testify. I'm going to let her testify. I'm going to let her lie under oath. I'm going to let her partner corroborate every lie, and then I'm going to walk into my courtroom wearing my robes, and I'm going to play the footage. David Thornton, you magnificent bastard. Just get me those robes, Catherine. They'll be there in 10 minutes. David hung up. Greg was watching him with narrowed eyes. Time's up. Let's go. David held out his wrists for the cuffs. Lead the way, officer. Greg cuffed him again, tighter this time, like it was personal, and led him up 2 flights of stairs to courtroom 3. David's courtroom. The room where he'd spent more than half his adult life. The room with his name on the door. They entered through the side door, the one reserved for defendants in custody. David kept his head down as Greg walked him to the defendant's table. He could feel eyes on him from the gallery. Courthouse employees, attorneys waiting for other cases, a few reporters who covered the court beat. None of them recognized him. Without his glasses, with his face swollen and bruised, wearing a flannel shirt and handcuffs instead of judicial robes, Judge David Thornton was invisible. Just another man in trouble. Just another defendant. Judge Morrison sat behind David's bench. Behind David's bench, looking bored and slightly annoyed at having his own schedule disrupted. Morrison was a decent judge, competent, fair, but he had no idea what he'd walked into this morning. No idea at all. Case number 2024-CR-4471, the clerk announced. The People versus David Thornton. Charges are trespassing on government property, resisting arrest, and assault on a police officer. Morrison glanced down at the file. Is the arresting officer present? Yes, Your Honor. Patricia Vance stood up from the prosecution side. She'd changed since the arrest. Fresh uniform, hair pulled back tight, every button polished. She looked like a recruiting poster. Professional, trustworthy, the kind of officer a jury would believe without question. Officer Vance, please approach and give your account of this morning's incident. Vance walked to the witness stand like she owned it. She raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then she began to lie. Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 this morning, I was conducting routine security screening at the courthouse's main entrance when I observed the defendant approaching the building. And what drew your attention to the defendant? The prosecutor asked. Sandra Mercer, mid-50s, sharp, efficient. She and Vance had clearly worked together before. There was an ease between them, a rhythm, like dance partners who'd rehearsed the same routine 100 times. Several factors, ma'am. The defendant was inappropriately dressed for a courthouse environment. He was carrying what appeared to be a child's lunchbox, which struck me as unusual, and he was wearing a large backpack, which is flagged in our security protocols as a potential concealment risk. What happened when you approached him? Vance folded her hands in her lap, the picture of calm professionalism. I asked the defendant to identify himself and state his purpose for entering the building. Standard procedure. He immediately became hostile. David sat perfectly still. His hands were folded on the table in front of him, the handcuffs catching the overhead light. His one good eye tracked Vance's every movement, every gesture, every micro-expression. Hostile in what way? Mercer prompted. He raised his voice, used profanity, told me to, and I'm quoting here, Your Honor, to get out of his way or he'd make me regret it. His exact words. Morrison raised an eyebrow. He threatened you? Yes, Your Honor. He became increasingly agitated when I asked him to submit to a bag search. He began shouting about his rights, claiming he didn't have to show identification, that I had no authority to stop him. And then, when I attempted to explain the security procedures, the defendant lunged at me. Vance paused for effect. He swung his fist at my face. I was able to partially deflect the blow, but the intent was clear. At that point, I had no choice but to physically restrain him for my own safety and the safety of everyone in the courthouse. Morrison nodded gravely. You used force to subdue him? Minimum necessary force, Your Honor. I redirected him against the wall to prevent further aggression, applied handcuffs, and escorted him inside. Any injuries the defendant sustained were the direct result of his own violent resistance. David's split lip twitched. Not quite a smile. Something darker. Something patient. Officer Gregg, Mercer called. Can you corroborate Officer Vance's account? Gregg stood. Same pressed uniform. Same rehearsed posture. He'd done this before. They'd both done this before. Yes, ma'am. I witnessed the entire incident from approximately 10 feet away. The defendant was verbally abusive from the moment Officer Vance approached him. When she asked for identification, he became physically threatening. Officer Vance responded with what I'd characterize as exceptional restraint, given the level of threat. Did you observe the defendant strike or attempt to strike Officer Vance? Yes, ma'am. He took a clear swing at her, closed fist. If she hadn't moved, he would have connected with her jaw. Morrison wrote something on his notepad. Officer Vance, in your professional assessment, what was the defendant's demeanor? Erratic, Your Honor. Possibly intoxicated, or under the influence of narcotics. He was sweating, his speech was slurred, and he seemed disoriented. Frankly, it reminded me of encounters I've had with individuals experiencing substance-induced psychosis. David almost admired it. The layering, the specificity, the way each lie built on the one before it, creating a narrative so detailed and consistent that any reasonable person would believe it. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a system, a machine, and Vance and Greg were its most practiced operators. Your Honor, if I may add something, Vance continued, leaning forward slightly. The defendant was carrying what appeared to be legal documents in his backpack, case files with judicial letterhead. I found that extremely suspicious for someone who couldn't even identify himself. Are you suggesting the documents were stolen? I'm suggesting that a man who shows up at a courthouse looking like he slept under a bridge, carrying official legal documents and a child's lunchbox, that's a profile that warrants investigation. Possible identity theft. Possible fraud. At minimum, it raises serious questions about how he obtained those materials. Mercer nodded. Your Honor, the people request that the defendant be held on all charges. Given the assault on a law enforcement officer, we also request elevated bail. Morrison looked at David for the first time. Really looked at him. Flannel shirt, bruised face, handcuffs. Does the defendant have legal representation? I'm representing myself, Your Honor, David said. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried something that made 3 people in the gallery sit up straighter. It was quiet, controlled, and it resonated with the kind of authority that doesn't come from volume. Morrison frowned. Sir, given the severity of these charges, I'd strongly recommend— I'm aware of my rights under the Sixth Amendment, Your Honor. I'm choosing to proceed pro se. I'm also invoking my right under Ferretta v. California to represent myself in these proceedings. The courtroom went very quiet. Prosecutors don't quote Supreme Court case citations. Defendants in flannel shirts don't cite Ferretta v. California from memory. Something in the air shifted, not dramatically, not yet, but the way pressure changes before a storm. Vance noticed. She glanced at Greg. Greg shrugged. Very well, Morrison said slowly. The defendant may address the charges. David stood. The handcuffs clinked against the table as he rose. His left eye was swollen shut. Dried blood still marked his chin. His flannel shirt was wrinkled and stained. But the way he stood, shoulders square, spine straight, chin level, that was something no amount of bruising could change. That was 23 years of commanding a courtroom. Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the opportunity to respond to these allegations. Before I begin, I'd like to note for the record that I've been in custody for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. During that time, I was denied my right to a phone call for the first 45 minutes. I was not read my Miranda rights at the time of arrest, and I was not informed of the specific charges against me until I entered this courtroom. Morrison's pen stopped moving. Mercer shifted in her chair. I'd also like to note that Officer Vance testified that I was possibly intoxicated or under the influence of narcotics. I would welcome a blood test administered immediately to refute that claim. I'm requesting one now, for the record. Vance's expression didn't change, but her left hand, the one resting on her knee, the one she thought nobody could see, closed into a fist. Regarding the charge of trespassing, David continued, Officer Vance testified that I was attempting to enter a restricted area. The main entrance of this courthouse is a public access point. It is not restricted. Any citizen has the constitutional right to approach and enter this building during operating hours. This is established under Hague versus Committee for Industrial Organization, 1939. Morrison was staring now, not at David's bruised face or his flannel shirt, at his eyes. The one eye that wasn't swollen shut was clear, focused, and burning with something that looked like it had been building for a very long time. Regarding the charge of assault on a police officer, Officer Vance claims I swung at her with a closed fist. I did not. I was reaching for my identification in my back pocket, identification I repeatedly attempted to present and was repeatedly prevented from presenting. I would note that this courthouse has extensive security camera coverage, including high-definition cameras at the main entrance. I'm formally requesting that all footage from this morning be preserved and reviewed. The color in Vance's face shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Just a fraction of a shade lighter. Furthermore, David said, Officer Gregg testified that he witnessed me throw a punch from approximately 10 feet away. I would ask the court to note that Officer Gregg was stationed inside the building at the ID checkpoint, which is separated from the main entrance by a glass partition and a 90-degree turn in the corridor. His line of sight to the front steps is physically obstructed. He could not have witnessed what he claims to have witnessed. Gregg's jaw tightened. He looked at Vance. Vance didn't look back. Morrison set his pen down. Mr. Thornton, you seem to have an unusually detailed knowledge of this courthouse's layout and security systems. I'm familiar with the building, Your Honor. Are you an attorney? I have significant experience with the judicial system. That's not what I asked. David paused. The courtroom was dead silent. Every person in the gallery was leaning forward. The stenographer's fingers hovered over her keys, waiting. Your Honor, David said, I believe the most appropriate course of action at this point would be a brief recess to allow for verification of identification and preservation of surveillance evidence. I think once my identity is confirmed, the nature of these proceedings will change significantly. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Whatever he saw in David's face, the calm, the certainty, the absolute absence of fear, it was enough. Court will recess for 15 minutes. The gavel came down. As Gregg moved to escort David back to the holding area, Vance caught his arm. What was that? She hissed. Who the hell is this guy? Relax, he's nobody. Probably watched too many legal dramas on TV. He knew the camera angles, Derek. He knew your sight line. So he's observant. Doesn't change anything. We've got the report, we've got our statements, we've got each other. Same as always. Vance watched David being led out of the courtroom. He walked with his head up, his back straight, the handcuffs jangling softly with each step. At the door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. Not at Vance, not at Gregg. At the bench. At his bench. And then he was gone. Vance stood in the emptying courtroom, arms crossed, jaw tight. She couldn't name the feeling crawling up her spine. She'd done this dozens of times, hundreds. The story was always the same, and it always worked. The system always believed the badge. Always. So why were her hands shaking? The 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. In the small conference room adjacent to courtroom 3, David sat alone with his hands cuffed in front of him, resting on the table. His left eye had swollen completely shut now, a dark purple knot that pulsed with every heartbeat. The blood on his chin had dried to a rust-colored streak. His wrists were raw, the skin broken in 2 places where the cuffs had been cinched too tight. He didn't move, didn't pace, didn't fidget. He sat the way a man sits when he's been preparing for something his entire life and didn't know it until this morning. The door opened. Bailiff Henderson, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s who'd worked courtroom 3 for 11 years, stepped inside, carrying a garment bag in one hand and a small wooden box in the other. He closed the door behind him and stood there, frozen, staring at David's face. "Judge Thornton," Henderson's voice cracked on the second syllable. "Oh my God! Judge Thornton, what did they— Your face! When they brought you through in cuffs, I didn't recognize you. I swear to God, I didn't know it was you." "I know you didn't, Henderson. It's all right." "It's not all right. I've worked your courtroom for 11 years, and I let them walk you through here in handcuffs like a— Henderson couldn't finish. His hands were shaking so badly, the garment bag was swaying. "Henderson," David's voice was quiet but firm. The voice he used when a courtroom was getting out of control. The voice that could silence a room without raising a single decibel. "I need you to take a breath. I need you to focus. Can you do that for me?" Henderson nodded, swallowing hard. "Good. Now uncuff me." Henderson set the garment bag and box on the table and fumbled for his keys. It took him 3 tries to get the key into the lock. When the cuffs finally clicked open and fell away, David brought his hands forward slowly, flexing his fingers, wincing as blood rushed back into the compressed tissue. 2 rings of raw, abraded skin circled both wrists like bracelets. "I'm going to need you to photograph these," David said, holding up his wrists. "Use your phone. Both wrists, both sides. Get the bruise on my face, too. And Henderson, make sure the timestamp is visible on every shot." Henderson pulled out his phone and did as he was told, his jaw clenching tighter with every photo. "Judge, who did this to you? What happened out there?" "Officer Patricia Vance, courthouse security. She stopped me on the front steps because I wasn't dressed the way she thought I should be. She decided I was a deadbeat father, here for a custody hearing. When I tried to show her my ID, she slapped me, slammed me into the wall, cuffed me, and booked me on fabricated charges. Her partner, Officer Gregg, witnessed the entire thing and backed her story under oath." Henderson's face went red. Not embarrassment. Rage. "That woman. I've seen her down there at the entrance. I've seen how she talks to people, the way she looks at anyone who doesn't— Henderson, not now. Right now, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Nothing more, nothing less." "Yes, sir." David reached for the garment bag and unzipped it. The black judicial robes hung inside, pressed and clean, the gold trim along the collar catching the fluorescent light. He'd worn these robes thousands of times. Sentencing hearings, murder trials, constitutional arguments, cases that made the front page and cases that never made any page at all. These robes had been his uniform, his armor, his identity for 23 years. This morning, a woman had looked at him without them and decided he was nothing. David stood and pulled the robes from the bag. He slipped his arms through the sleeves, slowly, letting the fabric settle across his shoulders. The weight of it was familiar, not heavy, but significant. Present, like putting on a second skin. He fastened the front and adjusted the collar, straightening the gold trim with fingers that were steady, despite everything. Then he opened the wooden box. The gavel inside was walnut, dark and polished smooth by years of use. Engraved on the handle, in small letters that you'd have to look closely to read, were 6 words. "For Lily, so Daddy fights fair." Sarah had given it to him the day he was sworn in. She'd been 7 months pregnant with Lily at the time. She'd had it engraved herself, secretly, and presented it to him in front of the entire courthouse. He'd cried. The only time anyone had ever seen Judge David Thornton cry in public. He lifted the gavel from the box and held it in his right hand. It fit perfectly. It always had. "Henderson." "Yes, Your Honor." When we walk back into that courtroom, I want you to announce me. Full, formal announcement. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Henderson, after the announcement, I need you to do something else. I need you to go directly to the security office and personally verify that the surveillance footage from this morning has been preserved. Chief Judge Wells has already ordered it, but I want eyes on it. Your eyes. Don't let anyone touch those files." "Consider it done, Judge." David looked at himself in the small mirror on the wall. A federal judge stared back at him. A federal judge with a black eye, a split lip, and raw wrists visible beneath the sleeves of his robes. He didn't try to hide any of it. "One more thing. The evidence table in the courtroom, my backpack and personal effects should be there. There's a lunchbox, a child's lunchbox with a note inside. I need that note preserved as evidence." "A lunchbox?" "My daughter packed my lunch this morning. Officer Vance stepped on it." Henderson's throat worked. He didn't speak for several seconds. "I'll take care of it personally, Judge." David took one final breath. He closed his eyes for just a moment, and there was Lily, standing in the doorway at 5:14 this morning, clutching her one-eared rabbit. "Are you going to help people today, Daddy?" "That's the plan, sweetheart." He opened his eyes. "Let's go." They walked down the corridor together, David in his robes, Henderson half a step behind. Court clerks stopped mid-stride. A young paralegal carrying a stack of files actually gasped. Two attorneys David had known for years did a double-take, then stared, their mouths open. Nobody said a word. Nobody needed to. The bruise on his face said everything. They reached the chamber entrance to courtroom 3. David stopped at the door and placed his hand flat against it. Behind this door, Officer Patricia Vance was sitting comfortably, probably checking her phone, probably already thinking about lunch, confident that another case had gone her way. Another lie believed, another victim processed through the machine. David pushed the door open. "All rise!" Henderson's voice exploded through the courtroom with a force that rattled the windows. "Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge David Thornton presiding." The words detonated like a bomb. Every head in the courtroom snapped toward the chamber door. Judge Morrison, still seated at the bench, jerked upright as if he'd been electrically shocked. Prosecutor Mercer dropped her pen. It rolled off the table and clattered on the floor. The only sound in a room that had gone completely, absolutely, devastatingly silent. David walked through the door. He moved the way he always moved entering his courtroom, measured, deliberate, unhurried, robes flowing, gavel in hand, 23 years of authority in every step. But today, for the first time, the gallery wasn't seeing a judge going through the motions. They were seeing a man who had been beaten, humiliated, handcuffed, and dragged through his own building, and who had come back wearing the only armor that mattered. The bruise on his face was visible from every seat in the house. His split lip, his swollen eye, the raw skin on his wrists where the robes didn't quite cover. Patricia Vance saw the robes first, then the gavel, then the face. The face she'd slapped 2 hours ago. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Her brain was processing what her eyes were seeing, but the two systems couldn't agree. It wasn't possible. The man in the flannel shirt. The deadbeat. The nobody she'd cuffed and booked and laughed about. He was walking toward the bench. He was walking toward the judge's chair. David climbed the 3 steps to the bench. His bench. He stood behind it for a moment, looking out over the courtroom the way he had 15,000 times before. Then he sat down, placed his gavel precisely where it belonged, and folded his hands in front of him. "Judge Morrison," David said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it always carried. Not louder than usual, not angrier. Just there, filling the room the way sunlight fills a window. "Thank you for covering my docket this morning. I apologize for the delay. As you can see, I was unexpectedly detained." Morrison was already standing, already gathering his papers, his face cycling through shock, horror, and something that looked like nausea. "David! Judge Thornton! My God, your face!"
"I didn't," she said. "I had no idea."
"I know you didn't, Bill. No one's blaming you. You can return to your own courtroom. I'll handle things from here." Morrison practically ran. He was out the chamber door in 4 seconds flat, his robes catching on the doorframe as he went. David turned his attention to the courtroom. The gallery was packed now. Word had traveled fast. Lawyers, clerks, court reporters, even a few judges from other floors who had heard whispers and come to see for themselves. The young law clerk from this morning was in the back row, her hand over her mouth. And in the front, Officer Patricia Vance sat rigid, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Next to her, Greg had the expression of a man who just realized the floor beneath him was actually thin ice over very deep water. "Officer Vance," David said, "please remain seated." Vance didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Her mouth was still open. Her eyes were locked on the nameplate at the front of the bench. The nameplate that had been there all morning. The nameplate she'd never bothered to read. The Honorable Judge David R. Thornton. "Officer Vance, approximately 2 hours ago, you stood at that witness stand, raised your right hand, and swore to tell this court the truth. Do you recall that?" Nothing. "I'll take your silence as a yes. Let me refresh your memory on what you told this court under oath." David opened a folder that had been placed on the bench by his clerk, Janet Morrison, who had been crying quietly at her desk since Henderson told her what happened. Inside were printed transcripts of Vance's testimony, captured in real time by the court stenographer. "You testified that I was, and I quote, inappropriately dressed for a courthouse environment. You told this court that I immediately became hostile when you approached me. You stated that I used profanity, made threats, and, this is my personal favorite, that I lunged at you with a closed fist." David's voice hadn't risen at all. It was still quiet, still measured, still the same voice that had delivered thousands of rulings from this bench. That was what made it devastating. There was no anger to dismiss, no emotion to discredit. Just facts, delivered by the man who had been on the receiving end of every lie. "You also testified that I was, quote, possibly intoxicated or under the influence of narcotics. You described my behavior as consistent with, quote, substance-induced psychosis." Officer Gregg then corroborated your account, testifying under oath that he witnessed me throw a punch at you from 10 feet away. David reached under the bench and produced a tablet computer. "I'd like to show the court some evidence that became available during our recess." He turned the screen toward the courtroom and pressed play. The security footage was crystal clear. High definition, multiple angles, perfect audio. Camera 7, mounted above the main entrance, unobstructed view of the front steps, showed everything. There was David, walking calmly toward the courthouse, backpack on one shoulder, lunchbox in hand. Not hurrying, not agitated. A man walking to work. There was Vance, stepping into his path, arms crossed. The audio picked up every word. "Where do you think you're going?" David's calm reply, his attempt to explain, his reach for his identification. And then, captured from 3 different angles, Vance grabbing his wrist, twisting it, the lunchbox hitting the ground, Lily's sandwich spilling out. the crayon notes skittering across the concrete. Several people in the gallery put their hands over their mouths. The footage continued, Vance's open palm striking David's face. The sound, sharp, unmistakable, echoed through the silent courtroom from the tablet's speakers. His glasses flying, his head snapping sideways. The blood. Then the slam, both hands on his collar, his back hitting the wall, the crack of his skull against stone. "Deadbeat trash like you don't get to walk through my door." Vance's voice, raw and vicious, filled the courtroom. Someone in the gallery made a sound, a small, involuntary noise of shock. David paused the video. "Officer Vance, do you see any profanity from the defendant in this footage? Any threatening behavior? Any lunging? Any closed fist?" Vance was staring at the frozen image on the screen. Herself, mid-slap, her face twisted with contempt. And something behind her eyes was collapsing. Not slowly, all at once, like a building imploding inward. "I'd also like to play a second piece of evidence," David continued. "Officer Vance testified that her body camera malfunctioned this morning. However, this courthouse utilizes an automatic cloud backup system for all officer body cameras. Footage is uploaded every 60 seconds to a secure county server. This system has been in place for 3 years, Officer Vance. I should know. I signed the order that implemented it." He swiped to the next video. Body camera footage, Vance's own camera, showing the approach from her perspective. Her voice, seconds before the confrontation, speaking to Greg. "Here comes another one. Look at him. Probably can't even afford a lawyer. $10 says he's here to beg some judge for weekend visitation after his ex finally got smart and left." And Greg's response, "What do you think? Custody case? Even the janitors dress better than this." Laughter. Both of them laughing. David let the audio play through the entire assault. Every word, every sound. The slap. The impact against the wall. Vance's voice. "Men like you shouldn't be allowed near children." Then he swiped to Greg's body camera footage. Greg, standing inside the entrance, watching through the glass as his partner brutalized a man on the courthouse steps. His voice, casual, amused. "Damn, Vance, you really clocked him." And Vance's response, loud and practiced. "He swung at me. You all saw it. He became aggressive, and I responded with appropriate force." "Absolutely. I saw the whole thing. He lunged at you." David stopped the video. The silence in the courtroom was so complete that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar. Officer Greg testified under oath that he witnessed me throw a punch from 10 feet away. David's voice was still quiet, still controlled. His own body camera footage shows him standing inside the building, behind a glass partition, around a 90-degree corner, with no line of sight to the front steps. He didn't see anything. He didn't need to. He already knew what story to tell. Because this wasn't the first time. David closed the tablet and set it down carefully. He looked at Vance. She was crying now. Not the quiet, dignified tears of genuine remorse, but the panicked, gasping sobs of someone watching their life disintegrate in real time. "Officer Vance," David said, "you told me this morning that men like me shouldn't be allowed near children." He reached under the bench one more time and produced a small, crumpled piece of paper. Green crayon on white, the edges dirty from the courthouse steps, a boot print visible across one corner. He held it up so the entire courtroom could see it. "Have a good day, Daddy. Make the world fair. Love, Lily." "My daughter wrote this for me this morning," David said. "She's 7 years old. She lost her mother 3 years ago in a car accident. I'm all she has. And this morning, you looked at me and decided I was an unfit parent because I was wearing a flannel shirt. He set the note down on the bench, carefully, the way you'd set down something sacred. You stepped on this, Officer Vance. You stepped on my daughter's words, and then you dragged her father through this courthouse in handcuffs while she sat in a second-grade classroom waiting for him to come home and tell her he'd made the world fair. Vance's sobs echoed off the walls. Greg had his head in his hands. The prosecutor, Sandra Mercer, was staring at the table in front of her, as if she could will herself to disappear through it. David lifted his gavel. I'm going to recuse myself from sentencing in this matter, because I am the victim in this case, and the law requires impartiality. But before I step aside, let me be absolutely clear about what happened in this courtroom today. His voice filled every corner of the room. A law enforcement officer assaulted a citizen without provocation. She fabricated charges. She committed perjury. Her partner conspired with her to file a false report and gave false testimony under oath. And they did all of this with the casual confidence of people who have done it many, many times before. To people who didn't have judicial robes hanging in the closet down the hall. He brought the gavel down once, hard. The sound rang through the courtroom like a bell. That confidence ends today. The echo of the gavel hadn't finished dying when the courtroom doors burst open and Chief Judge Catherine Wells walked in. She moved fast for a woman in her 60s. Robes flowing, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, a thick manila folder clutched against her chest. Behind her came two men in dark suits that David recognized immediately. FBI special agents. He'd worked with the Bureau's Civil Rights Division enough times to spot them by the way they carried themselves. Alert, contained, already cataloging every face in the room. Judge Thornton. Catherine stopped at the foot of the bench. Her eyes locked on his face. The swollen eye, the split lip, the bruise spreading down his jaw. And for one moment, just one, her composure cracked. Something raw passed across her features. Then it was gone, replaced by the steel that had made her the most respected chief judge in the state. Catherine, I was just about to call for you. I've been watching from chambers next door. The security office patched the feed through when they realized what was happening. She held up the manila folder. I also have something you're going to want to see. I've been on the phone with the FBI for the last 40 minutes. David nodded and stood. Members of the court, I am formally recusing myself from all proceedings related to this matter. I am the victim in this case, and under the Code of Judicial Conduct, Canon 3E, I cannot preside over any case in which my impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Chief Judge Catherine Wells will assume jurisdiction effective immediately. He gathered his gavel and Lily's crayon note. As he stepped down from the bench, he passed within 3 feet of Vance. She was still crying, mascara streaking down both cheeks, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to fold herself into something small enough to disappear. David stopped. He didn't look at her, but he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. You asked me this morning if I was deaf or stupid. The answer is neither, Officer Vance. I heard every word you said, and I remember all of them. He walked to a chair in the gallery's front row and sat down. For the first time in 23 years, Judge David Thornton was on the other side of the bench. It felt strange, unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's shoes. But he understood now, in a way he never fully had before, what it felt like to sit in that chair, to be powerless, to have your fate in someone else's hands, to know that everything depends on whether the person behind that bench gives a damn about the truth. Catherine Wells took her seat and put on her reading glasses. She didn't rush. She arranged her papers, adjusted her microphone, took a slow drink of water. Every second of deliberate silence was another second of pressure building in the room, and she knew it. Officer Patricia Vance, Officer Derek Gregg, please stand. Gregg stood immediately, mechanically, like a man operating on autopilot. Vance had to grip the table to pull herself upright. Her legs were barely holding. "Let me explain what's going to happen now," Catherine said. Her voice was different from David's, harder, sharper, with an edge that could cut glass. "And I want both of you to listen very carefully, because your lives are about to change permanently." She opened the manila folder. 37 minutes ago, I placed a call to the FBI's Civil Rights Division, specifically to Special Agent in Charge Robert Harlan, who some of you may know has been overseeing a federal investigation into patterns of police misconduct in this county. Vance's head snapped up. Something new entered her eyes. Not just fear now, but the specific, crystallized terror of someone who's just realized the hole they're in is much deeper than they thought. "That investigation," Catherine continued, "has been ongoing for 8 months. It was initiated by Judge Thornton himself, based on statistical patterns he identified in cases tried before his bench. Patterns involving excessive force. Patterns involving fabricated testimony. Patterns involving officers whose arrest records showed unmistakable evidence of bias." She pulled a document from the folder and held it up. "This is a preliminary FBI report compiled over the past 8 months. It contains a detailed analysis of Officer Vance's career as a law enforcement officer. I'm going to share some of its findings with this court." "Objection!" The word came from the back of the courtroom. A man in his 40s, wire-rimmed glasses, rumpled suit. He'd been sitting quietly since the recess, but now he was on his feet. "Your Honor, my name is Thomas Kraft. I've been retained by the Police Officers Union to represent Officer Vance. Any FBI report produced as part of an ongoing investigation is subject to—" "Mr. Kraft." Catherine looked at him over her reading glasses. "Your client committed felony assault against a federal judge on camera. She then committed perjury under oath in the judge's own courtroom. She did this with the assistance of a co-conspirator who also committed perjury under oath. I have the video. The entire courtroom has seen the video. If you'd like to make a procedural argument about the admissibility of character evidence, I suggest you save it for the trial, because right now, I am establishing probable cause for immediate arrest, and I have more than enough to do so without the FBI report." Kraft sat down. "Now," Catherine continued, "let's talk about Officer Vance's distinguished career." She pulled out a stapled document, at least 20 pages thick. "In 6 years as a courthouse security officer, preceded by 8 years of patrol duty, Officer Vance has been the subject of 31 formal complaints. 31, ladies and gentlemen. That's more than 2 per year for 14 years straight." She flipped to a marked page. Complaint number 4, filed 2013. Marcus Webb, a 61-year-old retired schoolteacher, alleged that Officer Vance, then a patrol officer, pulled him over for driving a, quote, "too nice car for someone like you." When Mr. Webb asked for her badge number, she dragged him from the vehicle and arrested him for resisting arrest. The charge was later dropped. The complaint was ruled unsubstantiated. Catherine turned another page. Complaint number 11, filed 2016. James and Dorothy Pearson, an elderly couple who got lost on their way to the courthouse for a property tax hearing. Officer Vance denied them entry because Mr. Pearson was wearing, quote, "clothes that don't belong in a courtroom." Mr. Pearson was wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt. He was 73 years old, a Korean War veteran. Officer Vance told him to, quote, "go back to whatever trailer park you came from." Complaint, unsubstantiated. David sat in the front row listening, his hands folded in his lap. He'd seen the statistics in the FBI report. He'd helped compile them. But hearing the individual stories one by one, name by name, was something different. Each complaint was a person. A real person who'd been humiliated, brutalized, and then told by the system that their experience didn't count. Catherine kept reading. Complaint number 19, filed 2019. Angela Torres, a 24-year-old law student, was stopped by Officer Vance at the courthouse entrance. Ms. Torres was wearing jeans and sneakers because she'd come directly from a study group. Officer Vance refused to let her enter, told her the courthouse wasn't a, quote, charity shelter, and when Ms. Torres protested, Vance grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. Ms. Torres filed a complaint and was subsequently visited at her apartment by 2 officers who suggested she withdraw it for her own good. She did. Complaint withdrawn. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Catherine let it build for a moment, then continued. Complaint number 26, filed last year. Robert Chen, a software engineer who came to the courthouse for jury duty. Officer Vance made him remove his shoes, belt, and jacket at the security checkpoint, then kept him waiting for 45 minutes while she processed other people ahead of him. When Mr. Chen asked why he was being delayed, Officer Vance told him that, quote, some people need extra screening. Mr. Chen is Asian American. He was the only non-white person in line. Complaint unsubstantiated. Catherine closed the file and set it down. 31 complaints, 14 years. Not a single one sustained. Not a single consequence. Not a single moment of accountability. She looked directly at Vance. Do you know why none of those complaints were sustained, Officer Vance? Because in every single case, your partner, whatever partner you happened to have at the time, corroborated your version of events. Every single time. The same script, the same story. The subject was aggressive. The subject was non-compliant. The officer used minimum necessary force. The same words, over and over for 14 years. Greg was staring at the floor. His face had gone the color of old cement. Officer Greg, Catherine said sharply, look at me. Greg raised his head. His eyes were wet. You testified under oath this morning that you witnessed Judge Thornton throw a punch at Officer Vance. Your own body camera footage shows you standing inside the building behind a glass partition with no visual on the front steps. You didn't see anything. You lied under oath. And based on the pattern we've just described, this wasn't your first time. Your Honor, Greg's voice broke. She told me to. She always, every time something happened, she told me what to say, and I went along with it because it was easier, Catherine finished for him. Because the system made it easy. Because nobody ever checked. Nobody ever pulled the camera footage. Nobody ever cross-referenced the sightlines. Nobody ever did the basic work of verifying whether your testimony was physically possible. She turned to the 2 FBI agents standing near the door. Gentlemen. Special Agent Harlan stepped forward. Mid-50s, gray at the temples. A face that looked like it had heard every lie the world had to offer and was tired of all of them. Your Honor, please inform Officer Vance and Officer Gregg of their status. Harlan walked to the front of the courtroom. He didn't hurry. He stopped directly in front of Vance and pulled a folded document from inside his jacket. Officer Patricia Vance, I'm Special Agent Robert Harlan with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. As of this morning, you are the subject of a federal criminal investigation. Based on evidence obtained today, including courthouse security footage and body camera recordings, you are being placed under arrest for the following federal charges. Vance started shaking. Full body shaking, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than fear. Assault on a federal judicial officer under 18 U.S. Code Section 111. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law under 18 U.S. Code Section 242. Perjury, under 18 U.S. Code Section 1621. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, under 18 U.S. Code Section 1512. And witness tampering, based on evidence of prior efforts to intimidate complainants into withdrawing formal grievances. Harlan nodded to the second agent, who moved behind Vance with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. The handcuffs clicked shut around Vance's wrists. The same sound David had heard that morning. The same cold metal. The same helpless feeling of your hands being locked behind your back. Vance looked at David, not with anger, not with defiance, with something worse, the desperate, drowning recognition that she had done this to herself.
"Judge Thornton," she whispered, "I didn't know. I swear to God, if I'd known who you were—"
David looked at her from the front row, his bruised face, his swollen eye, his raw wrists. That's exactly the problem, Officer Vance. You think it matters who I am. It doesn't. What you did to me this morning, you've done to 31 other people, probably more. The only difference between me and them is that I happen to have a robe in a closet upstairs. They didn't, and the system failed every single one of them. Vance opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. There were no words. There was nothing left to say. Harlan turned to Greg. Officer Derek Gregg, you are also under arrest. Federal charges of perjury, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and filing false statements. The second agent cuffed him while Harlan read the Miranda rights again. Greg didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just stood there with his hands behind his back, tears running silently down his face, staring at nothing. Catherine Wells watched both officers being led toward the side door, then addressed the courtroom one final time. Before we adjourn, I want to put several things on the record. First, I am ordering an immediate and comprehensive review of every case in which Officer Vance or Officer Gregg provided testimony or were involved in an arrest. Every case. Based on preliminary data from the FBI's investigation, that encompasses approximately 240 cases over the past 6 years for Officer Vance alone. She paused. Second, I am ordering the county to establish a dedicated review panel to re-examine every complaint filed against Officer Vance that was previously ruled unsubstantiated. Every complaint, going back 14 years, will be reopened, re-investigated, and adjudicated by an independent body with no connection to the police department. Third, I am issuing a preservation order for all electronic evidence related to this matter, including but not limited to surveillance footage, body camera recordings, internal affairs files, and any communications between Officer Vance, Officer Gregg, and members of their department's command structure. Catherine removed her reading glasses and held them in her hand. And fourth, and I want every law enforcement officer, every prosecutor, and every member of court staff in this building to hear this. What happened in this courtroom today was not an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of a system that rewards silence, punishes accountability, and treats complaints against its officers as nuisances to be filed away and forgotten. She looked at David. Judge Thornton, this court owes you more than an apology. But an apology is where we'll start. David shook his head slightly. I don't need an apology, Catherine. I need those 240 cases reviewed. I need those 31 complainants contacted, and I need every single person who was failed by the same system that failed me this morning to know that someone, finally gave a damn. Catherine nodded. Then that's what they'll get. She lifted her gavel. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. The sound was sharp and final, like a door closing on everything that had come before. As the courtroom began to stir, chairs scraping, voices rising, the first wave of stunned conversation breaking like water over a dam, David Thornton sat alone in the front row, his hands folded over his daughter's crumpled crayon note. His phone buzzed. A text from Janet, his clerk. Judge, the Peterson attorneys want to know if you're rescheduling to tomorrow or next week. David typed back with swollen fingers. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Tell them I'll be there. Then another text, from an unknown number. He opened it. Judge Thornton, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm the retired teacher from 2013. I just saw the news. I've been waiting 11 years for someone to believe me. Thank you. David stared at the message for a long time. Then he pressed his phone against his chest, closed his one good eye, and breathed. Marcus Webb wasn't the last message David received that day. By the time he walked out of courtroom 3, his phone had 17 missed calls, 42 text messages, and an inbox filling faster than he could scroll. Some were from colleagues, judges, attorneys, court staff, expressing shock, outrage, solidarity. Some were from reporters who'd already gotten wind of the story. But the ones that stopped him, the ones that made him lean against the corridor wall and press the heel of his hand against his good eye to keep from breaking down in the middle of his own courthouse, were from strangers. People he'd never met. People whose names he didn't recognize. People who had encountered Patricia Vance, or someone like her, and had been carrying the weight of that encounter alone, in silence, for years. Judge Thornton, I'm Angela Torres. She grabbed my arm so hard I had bruises for 2 weeks. Then 2 officers came to my apartment and told me to drop my complaint. I was 24 and scared out of my mind. I dropped it. I've regretted it every day since. Your Honor, my name is Dorothy Pearson. My husband James passed away last year. He never got over what that woman said to him. A Korean War veteran, 73 years old. She told him to go back to his trailer park. He cried in the car afterward. I've never seen him cry before. Not in 51 years of marriage. Judge, I don't know if you'll read this. My name is Robert Chen. I came for jury duty, and she treated me like a criminal. I filed a complaint and nothing happened. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered a lot. David read every single one. Standing in the corridor of his courthouse, his face bruised, his wrists raw, his robes still carrying the faint smell of the holding room, he read them all. And with each one, the thing he'd felt building inside him all morning solidified into something permanent, something that wouldn't fade when the bruises did. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. Janet found him there 10 minutes later. She'd been crying. He could tell from the redness around her eyes. But she'd pulled herself together the way she always did. Because Janet Morrison had been his clerk for 15 years, and she did not fall apart on the job. Judge, there's about 30 reporters in the lobby. 2 news vans in the parking lot. CNN just called the main line. What do you want me to tell them? Nothing yet. Not today. The FBI agents want to debrief you before you leave. I know. Tell them I'll be in my chambers in 20 minutes. And Judge, Lily's school called. They said she's fine, but the after-school program ends at 5:30, and it's already almost 4. David checked his watch. 4 hours. He'd been in this building for 4 hours since the assault, and it felt like both a lifetime and a single breath. Call the school. Tell them I'll be there by 5:30. If I'm late, ask if Mrs. Patterson can stay with her. Lily likes Mrs. Patterson. Of course, Janet hesitated. Judge, your face. Should you go to the hospital? I'm fine, Janet. You're not fine. Your eye is swollen shut and there's blood on your collar. Janet. He looked at her with his one good eye, and she saw what she always saw, the quiet stubbornness of a man who would keep going until the work was done, no matter what. I'm fine. 20 minutes. She nodded and walked away. David went to his chambers, closed the door, and sat down at his desk. For the first time all day, he was completely alone. No handcuffs, no gallery watching, no cameras, just him and the silence, and the framed photo of Sarah on his desk, laughing at something off camera, her hair blowing sideways in the wind. "Hell of a morning, Sarah," he said quietly. He sat there for a moment, just breathing. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a clean handkerchief, the old-fashioned kind, white cotton, monogrammed, because David Thornton was the kind of man who still carried a handkerchief, and gently wiped the dried blood from his chin. He looked at himself in the small mirror on the back of his door. The bruise was spectacular, purple and black, spreading from his cheekbone to his jaw. His left eye was a slit. His lip was crusted where it had split. Lily was going to see this face in about 90 minutes. That thought hit him harder than Vance's hand had. He picked up his phone and called the one person who might understand what he was about to walk into at home. His sister, Margaret, answered on the first ring.
David, I just saw the news. Are you okay? Is Lily okay?
Lily doesn't know yet. That's why I'm calling. I look rough, Meg. I don't want her to see me and panic.
How rough?
Black eye, split lip. I look like I lost a bar fight.
Jesus, David.
I need advice. How do I explain this to a 7-year-old without scaring her? Margaret was quiet for a moment. She was a child psychologist, had been for 20 years, and David had relied on her more times than he could count since Sarah died. She was the one who'd helped him understand Lily's nightmares, the one who'd taught him that sometimes the best thing a father could do was sit on the floor and say nothing while his daughter cried. "Tell her the truth," Margaret said. "Age-appropriate truth. Someone hurt Daddy, but Daddy is okay, and the person who did it is going to face consequences." Kids are more resilient than we think, David. What scares them isn't the truth. It's the feeling that something is being hidden from them. She's going to be upset. She's going to be upset no matter what. But she's also going to see her father being honest with her, and that matters more than you know. Let her feel what she feels. Don't try to fix it. Just be there. When did you get so smart? Always been smart. You were too busy being a judge to notice. David almost laughed. Almost. Thanks, Meg. David, what you did today, what I'm hearing on the news, I'm proud of you. Mom would have been proud of you. His throat tightened. I'll call you tonight. You better. He hung up, finished the FBI debrief, 2 hours of detailed testimony recorded on video, every moment of the morning recounted with the precision of a man who'd spent his life weighing evidence, and left the courthouse at 5:22 p.m. The lobby was still crowded with reporters. Henderson had arranged for David to leave through the judge's parking garage entrance, away from the cameras. David thanked him, walked to his truck, and sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before turning the key. On the passenger seat, his backpack, returned by the evidence team. Inside it, slightly crushed but intact, was Lily's lunchbox. The peanut butter sandwich was ruined. The juice box had leaked. But the lunchbox itself was fine. David opened it and found the note, the original, not the one he'd used in court, but a second one he hadn't noticed that morning, tucked under the sandwich. Dear Daddy, I put extra chocolate chips in your pancakes today because you look tired. I love you more than space. Love, Lily. P.S. Don't forget to eat your sandwich. David Thornton, federal judge, 23 years on the bench, a man who had sentenced murderers without flinching, put his forehead against the steering wheel and wept. He pulled into the Jefferson Elementary parking lot at 5:29. 1 minute to spare. Lily was sitting on the front steps with Mrs. Patterson, swinging her legs and talking about something involving a caterpillar she'd found during recess. She looked up when David's truck pulled in, and her face lit up the way it always did. That pure, total, uncomplicated joy that only a child can produce at the sight of their parent. Then she got closer, and the light changed. "Daddy!" She stopped 3 feet away. Her eyes went wide. "Daddy, your face!" David crouched down so he was at her level. "Hey, sweetheart. What happened to your face? Who hurt you?" Her lower lip was trembling. Her hands were clenched at her sides. She looked like she was trying very hard to be brave and not quite making it. "Someone hurt Daddy today," David said, keeping his voice steady and warm. "A person who was supposed to protect people used her power the wrong way, and she hurt me. But I'm okay. I promise you, I'm okay." "Does it hurt?" "A little bit, but I've had worse. Remember when I stepped on your Lego castle in the dark? That hurt more." She didn't laugh. She was staring at his eye, at the purple bruise, at the cut on his lip. "Did you cry?" "No, but I felt like it." "It's okay to cry, Daddy. You told me that." "You're right. I did tell you that." She reached out and touched his bruised cheek with her fingertips, so gently it barely registered as contact. "Did you make the world fair today?" There it was, the same question she asked every morning, but today it carried a weight that would have buckled most men. "I tried, Lily. Something unfair happened to me today, and I tried to make it right. Not just for me, for other people too. People who had the same thing happen to them, but nobody listened." "Did they listen to you?" "They did." "Good." She nodded once, decisively, with the absolute moral clarity that only a 7-year-old possesses. "Because hurting people is wrong, even if you're a grown-up, even if you have a badge." David pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "When did you get so smart?" "Mommy told me. She said the biggest people have to be the most careful because they can hurt the most." David held his daughter on the steps of her elementary school, his face bruised, his heart full, and thought about all the people who'd been hurt by someone who wasn't careful with their power. Rosa Delgado, Marcus Webb, Angela Torres, James and Dorothy Pearson, Robert Chen, and the dozens of others whose names he didn't yet know but would learn in the weeks and months ahead. He carried Lily to the truck, buckled her in, and drove home. That night, after mac and cheese and 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web and a prolonged negotiation about bedtime that Lily won by 4 minutes, David sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and began writing. Not a ruling, not a legal opinion, not a memorandum. A letter to every person who had ever filed a complaint against Officer Patricia Vance, every person whose grievance had been stamped unsubstantiated and filed away in a drawer. Every person who had been told, in so many words, that their experience didn't matter. Dear Mr. Webb, my name is Judge David Thornton. This morning, the same officer who hurt you in 2013 assaulted me on the steps of my courthouse. I want you to know 3 things. First, I believe you. Second, I'm sorry the system failed you. Third, I am going to make sure it never fails anyone the same way again. He wrote 31 letters, 1 for each complaint. It took him until 2 in the morning, typing with swollen fingers, pausing occasionally to ice his face with a bag of frozen peas that Lily had helpfully labeled Daddy's owie bag before bed. The weeks that followed moved fast. The FBI's investigation, which had been building quietly for 8 months, accelerated rapidly in the wake of the courthouse assault.
Special Agent Harlan's team, now armed with Vance's body camera footage and the security recordings, began interviewing every person named in the 31 complaints. 26 of them agreed to cooperate. Several had kept their own records, photos of bruises, written accounts, even a few surreptitious audio recordings made on cell phones. The pattern that emerged was damning. Vance had not been operating alone. Her behavior had been enabled, protected, and in some cases actively encouraged by a command structure that viewed complaints as threats to departmental reputation rather than evidence of wrongdoing. Internal affairs investigations had been deliberately superficial. Complainants had been intimidated. Records had been altered. 3 weeks after the assault, Harlan called David at home. "Judge, we've completed our preliminary review. It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Vance is the tip of the iceberg. We've identified 9 other officers with similar complaint patterns. 3 supervisors who signed off on the unsubstantiated findings, despite clear evidence to the contrary. And the former Internal Affairs Director. He retired 2 years ago. We have emails showing he instructed investigators to close complaints without conducting interviews." "How many tainted cases total?" 243 from Vance alone. Combined with the other officers, we're looking at over 600 cases that need review. David closed his eyes. 600 cases. 600 people who would pass through a broken system and come out the other side damaged, disillusioned, and unheard. "We're going to need a task force," David said. "Dedicated prosecutors, independent investigators, a victim notification program. And I want a community oversight board established before any of the reviewed cases go back to court." "That's going to take resources." "Then we'll find resources. This isn't optional, Robert. 600 people trusted the system, and the system lied to them. We fix that. All of it. Whatever it takes." The task force was operational within a month. Chief Judge Wells appointed 3 independent judges to oversee the case reviews. The State Attorney General assigned a dedicated prosecution team. And David, though he couldn't preside over any case connected to Vance, worked 18-hour days coordinating the effort, reviewing files, meeting with victims, and building the institutional framework that would prevent this from happening again. Patricia Vance's trial began 4 months after the assault. David attended every day. He sat in the gallery, in civilian clothes, his face long since healed, but the memory as fresh as the morning it happened. Vance was represented by a team of attorneys funded by the police union, but the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, body camera recordings, the testimony of 26 former victims, the FBI's statistical analysis showing arrest and force patterns that were impossible to explain as anything other than systemic bias. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vance stood motionless as the verdict was read. She didn't cry this time. She didn't speak. Whatever fight had been in her was gone. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. Derek Gregg, who had cooperated with the FBI in exchange for a reduced charge, was sentenced to 3 years for perjury and conspiracy. He read a statement in court admitting that he had corroborated Vance's false reports on at least a dozen occasions. "I told myself it wasn't my problem," he said, his voice thin and unsteady. "I told myself she was the one doing it, not me. But I was there, I saw it, and I said nothing. That makes me just as responsible." At Vance's sentencing, the judge, a federal judge from another district brought in to ensure impartiality, allowed victim impact statements.
14 people spoke. Marcus Webb, Angela Torres, Robert Chen, Dorothy Pearson, who spoke on behalf of her late husband James and broke down twice but finished every word she'd come to say. David was the last to speak. He stood at the podium. No robes, no gavel, just a man in a suit with a scar on his lip that would never fully fade. Your Honor, 6 months ago, Officer Vance looked at me and saw someone she could hurt without consequence. She saw my clothes. She saw my face. She made a judgment. And based on that judgment, she decided I didn't deserve to be treated as a human being. He paused. But I'm not here to talk about what she did to me. I'm here to talk about what she did to every person in this room who came before me. The people who filed complaints and were told their complaints didn't matter. The people who were hurt and then told they were lying. The people who learned, through years of experience, that justice was not for them. He looked at Vance. She was watching him, not with hatred, not with defiance, with the hollow expression of someone who had finally run out of ways to avoid the truth. Officer Vance, I don't hate you. I don't say that to sound noble. I say it because hatred would be a waste of the energy I need to fix what you broke. But I do want you to understand something. The power you abused, the badge, the uniform, the authority, those things were given to you by the same community you terrorized. They trusted you, and you used that trust as a weapon. He stepped back from the podium. Your Honor, the people aren't asking for vengeance. We're asking for accountability. And we're asking for a sentence that tells every officer in this country that the badge is not a license to destroy lives. Vance was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, no parole. 9 other officers from her department were terminated. 3 supervisors were criminally charged. The former Internal Affairs Director was indicted on 12 counts of obstruction of justice. The entire department was placed under federal consent decree, requiring independent oversight for a minimum of 10 years. Of the 243 cases Vance had tainted, 112 resulted in overturned convictions or dismissed charges. 51 people who had been wrongfully incarcerated were released. The county paid $11.4 million in restitution, funded by a restructuring of the police department's budget that eliminated 16 administrative positions and redirected the money to a victim compensation fund. David personally called every one of the 51 people released from prison. Some of those calls lasted 5 minutes. Some lasted 2 hours. One man, a 43-year-old father of 3 who had served 4 years on a fabricated drug charge, couldn't speak for the first 3 minutes of the call. He just cried. When he finally found words, he said only this: "I thought nobody was ever going to come." "Someone came," David said. "I'm sorry it took so long." The courthouse where it all happened was not renamed. David refused the proposal when Chief Judge Wells brought it to him. "Name it after the people who were hurt," he said, "not the person who got lucky enough to be wearing a robe." Instead, a bronze plaque was installed near the main entrance, the same entrance where Vance had slapped David across the face on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The plaque listed the names of every person who had filed a complaint against Vance and been ignored. 31 names. Below them, a single line: "They told the truth. The system didn't listen." This courthouse will never make that mistake again. On the 1-year anniversary of the assault, David arrived at the courthouse early, the way he always did. He parked his truck, grabbed his backpack, and walked toward the main entrance. He was wearing a suit today, but some mornings, when the schedule was light and Lily had made breakfast extra messy, he still came in jeans and a flannel shirt. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever would again. He paused at the plaque and read the names the way he did every morning. All 31. He'd memorized them months ago, but he read them anyway, because remembering was the least he could do. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily, sent from the school iPad she was technically not supposed to be using during class. "Hi, Daddy. Are you going to help people today?" David smiled. The scar on his lip pulled slightly when he smiled. It always would. He typed back, "That's the plan, sweetheart." Then Judge David Thornton walked through the front doors of his courthouse, climbed the stairs to his courtroom, put on his robes, picked up the walnut gavel his wife had given him the day their daughter was born, and went to work. Because justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a flannel shirt and carries a lunchbox packed by a 7-year-old girl who believes her father can make the world fair. And the measure of a man is not what he does when the whole world is watching. It's what he does on an ordinary morning, with a bruised face and a broken heart, when he picks himself up off the ground and says, "Not today, not ever again, not to anyone." That is the promise David Thornton made, and that is the promise he kept.